We are recording this. We will make this call, and even our first call that we did 5 weeks or so ago, make that available. So if people that aren't with us that want to see what we all look like and so forth, they can certainly check us out at a future time. So again, thanks for being on the call. The biggest change since our first call, we didn't know that reunion was officially going to be canceled and become a virtual event, unfortunately. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that. I just have a couple things just to make sure everyone's up to date, because you might have questions about that. So let me read you some of the college language around reunion. And while there's real progress at both the state and national level on vaccination, there is sufficient uncertainty due to variations in vaccination rates, the unknown impact of the variants of COVID-19, and Maine guidelines for indoor gatherings and face coverings for us to go forward with such a large-scale event. So as you know, reunion was scheduled for June 11th through the 13th. Now being a virtual event, it'll be expanded to June 7th through 12th with lots of different types of virtual programming. This year's event will be a highly comprehensive and interactive experience. We have contracted with a virtual events platform, which I hear is like state-of-the-art, really cool. Haven't seen it, but something to behold. But it will allow us to offer a wide range of programming, social connection, and activities. There will be a survey. Keep an eye out for a survey down the road that asks us what we want to see during that time. There'll be activities for everyone at reunion, and there'll be activities just for our class. So, so real important that if you have ideas that you put them out there into that survey. I know some people have said, well, I heard they're having commencement. How come we can't have reunion? Well, commencement, right? The class of 2021 has been on campus under strict health guidelines for this academic year. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I heard commencement is going to be in 2 parts. So half the class in one, half the class in the other, to allow for social distancing, limited family engagement. And then after graduation, residence halls and commons effectively are going to be closed for the summer. So bringing 2,000 people onto campus for a reunion is just not feasible at this time. So the college is going to work on trying to find other ways to connect people over the next, next 12 to 18 months. Some people have said, well, can we just go next year? Well, adding 2,000 people next year onto the 2,000 already coming for a reunion is probably just not workable. But, and this is not officially from the college, but I do know anyone can go to any reunion. So if you and a bunch of your friends just want to happen to go to reunion next year, you can certainly sign up. I don't know if you'll get in the dorms, but you can certainly sign up. So I'll just leave that sort of sitting out there. So I will, if you have any other questions about reunion, maybe we can hold those to the end, because I don't want to delay any longer getting to our guest speaker, and want to formally welcome and introduce James Reese, Associate Dean of Students. James, so great to have you on our call with us today. And just to get and a lot of you submitted questions. Thank you for that. We'll try to get to them as best we can. We've consolidated some of the questions that were very similar. I'm sure there'll be some questions that, and we set these to James, so he saw them in advance. But James, we did hold some back just so we could maybe trip you up or surprise you or stump you. But let's get started with the questions. I know we all love to hear what you're doing now, and like to hear what your sort of transition throughout the years has been in terms of what your role is and groups that you've worked with. But first, I'd just be really curious, James, what brought you to Bates in the first place? We all have our reasons why we all started there in fall of '77. What brought you to Bates, and what was attractive to you from a job perspective?
Sure, I'll try to keep that short, but it's a long answer. Everything on the table. So I graduated from Middlebury, a lot of you know that. And the person who was doing the housing job at Bates previous to your enrollment for 2 years was a Middlebury grad, a person I knew pretty well. So in my senior year, she called me early one morning. I was back when we had the hallway phones, and someone knocked on my door. It's 8:20 in the morning, said, "You have a phone call?" So I said, "No, I know it's not for me. Nobody calls me that early." And because people knew me well, and you all do too. So they said, "No, your phone." So I go and she's on the phone, and she says, "Oh, I'm leaving Bates after 2 years. It was a 2-year contract." And she said, "You always ask me so many questions about my job. I thought you might be interested. So are you interested to apply?" So I said, "Oh, yes, I'm very interested." And so um, I applied out of that. She left Bates, went to Brown University, got her PhD in American Studies. I was an American Studies major. I was kind of following her through life. And she went on to become the Associate Dean of the Yale Graduate School. So I tell people that I came here to stay for 2 years, and I decided that I didn't want to be the Associate Dean of the Yale Graduate School. So I stayed at Bates, because I liked it here. So actually, Dean Kerrigan took over the office and interviewed me. And, he and I got along really well. I have great affection for him. I know most of you do. A few of you got in trouble judicially with him, so you might not have as much affection, but, well, they're not here tonight.
Fine.
And so after 2 years, he said, "We have this 2-year contract, but would you mind staying a third year?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I added quickly that, especially because of the class of '81. And so, we, fourth year, at the end of the third year, he called me in and said, "Would you stay another year?" I said, "Yes." And then in year number 7, he said, "I know you want," he said, "I know I want you to stay. Just let me know when you want to leave." So, um, so I was here doing housing. I always say to your class, I didn't house all of you. Well, if you actually liked your roommate, I would take the credit for it. But I didn't match you up. That other person did. And and then and then of course some people came in for some room changes that sometimes worked out. I won't name any names, but hi Kathy, Juicy, and and that's not breaking confidentiality. It's just the funniest story ever of Kathy and her roommate coming in, and third person said they're so talkative and outgoing. They came in my office and said nothing as they were talking to me. So I don't think I moved you, did I? Anyway, so long story short, I was doing that in international students and the kind of the residential assistance oversight in partnership with others. In my third year here at Bates, I did those 3 things: housing and also student activities directing. And that was a lot of fun and a lot of time. Um, but even better way to get to know the campus. And I love that. And I point that out now so that Meredith can go back and tell all of her colleagues. And when I tease people here today that in year number 3, I did housing and student activities, the colleagues today don't like it because they're in those positions and each of them has 3 assistants. And so, so I did that. That kind of worked the same way. I stopped doing housing. I did student activities up till just under 1990. Then I moved back into Lane Hall to more general deaning, they called it. Celeste Branham had taken over the Dean of Students role, and she was here until 2004. I was just in Lane Hall doing all kinds of things through 2012 when this new president came. That sounds interesting language, this new president. So when Clayton Spencer arrived, she had visions and still does about changing everything in the school and just kind of reordering structures and the whole bit. So they've done that. So now I'm still in charge of international students and international student programs. We have a new global education office, and we have married international students and study abroad in one office. It happens to be located in Roger Williams Hall. And so I tell people I was sent over to get Roger Williams Hall in order finally, and it's worked well. And so that structure is what it is now. Housing is in one side of the campus. Student activities is now called Campus Life in another part of the campus. And we're all kind of spread out. It's kind of a model that's used at a lot of larger schools. I always liked our everybody involved together model. I always liked the horizontal nature of our administration and oversight here. It's a little bit more vertical now, just to be honest. And so that sums up what I do. And so I'm largely doing international students. You know, and it was when I was here, when you came, there were 27 students on campus. Now we have 150, and we have another 80 or so students who are dual citizens, recent permanent residents, US citizens who have never lived in the United States. And so they all can come under my umbrella. And I thoroughly enjoy, working with all of them there. So that's the long answer to what I do now and what's kind of changed for me.
Great, thanks for that. What would you, and you may alluded to it a little bit during that, but thinking about Bates in 1977 and thinking about Bates today, to you, what's been the biggest change?
Yeah, I saw that question, and that was interesting. And as I go on, I had expected and hoped that soon in this conversation, we make it a conversation because, if you're jumping in to ask questions in the middle of my long monologues, I'm fine with that. I'd love to hear what everybody would say, and I know it's a lot of energy to share tonight among each other. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of what's different, and this is true at every school, you've all heard that this generation and this generation now could have been, quote, this generation in 2005, same deal. There's a more of a sense of entitlement. And, it's a word that if we try not to lend a negative context to, it's just kind of an expectation of, what's there. So when we were all in school, and we were all in school around the same time, we arrived at our campuses, and if something was there, we're like, oh, they're kind of great, we might ask a question about, hey, well, can we get this or that in the near future? I think during your time, there was a question about, could we have, now it's WRBC, but the radio station WRJR for you, could we have it be stereo? And, the administration was like, no. And then they had a meeting over 2 summers, and, they put in the stereo tower, very quietly, and then announced to the school, and everyone clapped, and that's how it works. So now students will arrive and they'll kind of say things like, wow, we only have one artificial turf field. Why don't we have others? And you know, and then the one that drives me nuts, literally, is students arrive here and they'll say things like, "Oh, I hear Middlebury has Ben and Jerry's ice cream, at the Commons, their Commons," and so they're like, "Why don't we have it?" So I got upset with Middlebury. I called over there and said, "What's up with this Ben and Jerry's thing?" And so what happened was they explained that at Ben and Jerry's factory, they make the vats of ice cream, and then they scoop it all out to the bottom. Then there's the dredge on the bottom. They scoop it up and they sell it to Middlebury, and Middlebury says they have Ben and Jerry's ice cream. so, so the solution for that is we could buy the same dredge. so, and so I'm always trying to think creatively in terms of, I think we might just go over to the faculty and just bring some of it home one day and we can say we have it. So that's one of the things that's changed. The sense of expectation in terms of facilities and the whole bit, and people kind of pose it, students are posing in the question of, well, why do we have this, because X school or Y school has that. Now, we don't go lacking for anything here, but, you kind of hear that all the time. Even this past week, a student said to me, how come we don't have an international house and other schools do? Well, I explained that our original mission and origin was an inclusive, collective approach to matters. And so we don't have a lot of houses that a lot of schools have, and we try to exchange and interact in ways. We even have theme houses, but not on a permanent basis, and in ways that has worked for Bates. And then after I give the long answer, they like that. And so that's what's changed. In terms of other things, the facilities have always been strong here. I've always liked that in addition to our exterior of our buildings looking good, the interior of our buildings work. Our offices keep them up very well, incredibly well maintained. We always have enough equipment to sustain ourselves with the new science building. We're going to get all kinds of new science equipment. That's one of the largest parts of the price tag. And so that might have changed over against what you had available. But I think, you didn't, lose sleep at night saying, oh, we don't have, a larger telescope to look, out of the science building a whole bit. And it was an interesting question. I didn't have a lot in terms of what's changed. And I always talk about this. The spirit of the place is the same. People choose to come here for the same reasons that you did. And I guess if that holds up over 40 years or the years before you came or into the future, that's remarkable because people, they know it's a great school and it's a great school academically. But in terms of coming to expect and be hopeful to be a part of conversations and groupings of people and meeting people across lines and groups, then that's great. That's something you always have to work at, but it's something that's here that I don't find to be true at other places. And I'll conclude that line of thought with graduate from 2002, which to me seems like yesteryear. So all of you, it doesn't seem like you've been gone that long, you can believe it. But she said that she liked Bates okay, but she said she misses the Bates conversations. I said, define that. And she said, that's the conversation where everyone's talking. And then you look around the circle and you notice that a couple of people haven't said anything. And you actually say, what do you think about what we're talking about? And so that pulls people in. And that way of participating and interacting with each other works here, just like if you're walking across campus and you're a visitor, people at Bates will say hello to you, and people have chosen to come here because of the hellos. And so that spirit and active way of being is still prevalent here, and it defines a lot of the life, and lots of people talk about that outside of myself.
Mm-hmm. It strikes me, it's great to hear that sort of the ethos of the school has stayed the same and kids essentially are the same. But in some respects, do you see Bates as a more global organization because of the ability to be global, meaning the internet and, just so many opportunities that we didn't have. We had our own opportunities that people in the 50s didn't have. But today have lots of different opportunities that we didn't have.
That's a great question. And the simple answer is yes. And I'm realizing now one of the giant differences is in the middle 80s, late 80s, the start of the junior semester abroad program. So for 81 class and before and after, it was a year or stay here, a year abroad or stay here. And the study abroad, junior semester abroad program is just taken off at every school. But now it was always an average of 45 to 50 students who took us junior year abroad year when you were here. Mm-hmm. And now with the junior year abroad program and the junior semester abroad program, we each semester will have about 175 students away. Wow. And so to come to Bates and be a part of the equation, the percentage number of 70% of our students study away at some point of their 4 years, and that includes short-term trips that are still very active, then that fits apart with the global nature. Students, in addition to the 150 students coming from around the world, there's a factor in our society of families involving one parent from the US and another parent from another country. I'm in that myself. And so we counted up last year and added in the international students, and anyone who has any kind of international connection, there were 327 students who could be defined as part of an international circle as such. And so there's that. And then, yes, with the internet and, students bring into Bates a wider set of experiences with global issues. They might not have traveled out much, but they know about it. It helps with their application. It helps with their conversation on the campus. It also intertwines with what the professors are teaching and what students go on to do. And I love these stories about several of them. Student was talking to me. She said that a graduate was talking to me, and I said, "Oh, where you live now?" She said, "I live in Paris." I said, "Oh, that's nice. Well, Paris, what's up with that?" She said, "Well, I got a job at Nike when I graduated, and after 4 years, they called me in, and they said, wow, you have a secondary concentration in French? And she goes, yes, I do. She said, I also studied a semester in France also. They said, oh, okay, you're going to work in the Paris office of Nike. So they asked her in the form of a question, and she said, sure, I'll take that. So people are going out as such, and so many people are going around the world because of experiences they've had here educationally. And, you know, they weren't even thinking about that when they left, and it's a great benefit to them.
Cool. That's really great. So let's talk just a few minutes about Bates today, or Bates the last year, COVID. How is that from your perspective? And we hear bits and pieces and hear of lockdowns and everything, but love to just hear from your perspective how that's.
Sure, I'd love to hear what people have heard. So in my absolute honest opinion, I think we've handled COVID very, very, very well. Our Dean of Students, he's known to be an organizational expert. And so in the form of setting up the tests, setting up the arrival of all students, having the tests arranged in a way that they're not so time consuming and they're very efficient, and most important, safe in terms of giving the results well. Procedures, protocols for if anyone gets the COVID virus, or if someone's near to them and we have to do the contact tracing to make sure that they're, you know, having remote classes available for everyone, whether they're here on campus or they're not here on campus, they're home and even around the world, or some professors who preferred not to teach this year. All of that has been organized precisely so that even by the middle of September, the tests were going well, the professors were fine with the structure of the remote teaching. They had a lot of flexibility. Some of this even started last March too, but they had a lot of flexibility to you know, suggest their own tweaks and adjustments. And the college worked very hard at it. Students who were in other nations and didn't have strong internet access were given money to pay for the best services in those countries so that they could study well, because they were studying at different hours of the 24-hour clock. And so it's just worked really well on that. So I have to give the college kudos for that, starting with the tests. And the tests have a way of having everyone feel confident and safe in a way that's helps with the life here. If there are challenges of this year, it's very different, one, to go to Commons and just walk through and get students go through and they just get food in boxes that are served to them. It's a box and they can put it in a bag. You can have as much as you want. You can go back as many times you want, but you're stacking up your boxes in a bag and taking it to your room to eat in September and October. And we had a warm fall, and we have a warm day today. Garcelon Field became the dining hall. And but in January, no, we weren't here in January, in February, that's when it was very stark. And so you got your food, you went back to your room. And so that's a reality, but students wanted to be here. So we were, and when you include, we're 1,800 students now. We were something like 1,450 when you were here. And the 1,800 doesn't include the 125 junior semester abroad people, you know, so let's call it, you know, 1,900 students. So out of 1,900 students who are all going to be here this past September, potentially 1,720 showed up. The others studied remotely. Half of that number was international students who they stayed home because there was a lot of concern around the world about the COVID here, despite being in Maine. Quite honestly, the government troubled a lot of families in terms of how the US was addressing the COVID situation. But the US students did show up. And this semester, as we started out, a few more students decided to stay home. More international students came back, but a few more Americans went home. I think they figured that they were gonna eat, you know, in their room after walking in the cold, they could just do it at home and just study their classes remotely. And so we have 1,640 students here now. So those two numbers are larger than what we were anticipating last June 1st, hoping for September. I think they were hoping for at least 1,300 students to come to campus, and it had fortunate outcomes. So we haven't had to have layoffs and the whole bit. You know, there are some financial costs to it all, but that's been managed out well. We've used a hotel in town to We thought we were going to be overrun a little bit, in the fall. And then September 1st, we needed it. And then the last part of the challenges is we're in a module system. We did 2 courses for 7 weeks and then 2 more courses the next 7 weeks. So this is not short term with, 2 courses. This is an intense model where the lab courses might meet twice a week. Students can state that they don't have the weekend or Sunday to write up their labs. And so that's one form of the intensity. So this module system, which was put in place so that if in November we had to go home, all of us, for whatever reasons, due to COVID, we would have had 2 courses in our pocket. And one of the questions coming up was what's next year look like? The faculty, was kind of, I would call it, encouraged by the administration to vote in the module system for September, but the students erupted the next day. And the day after that, Biden announced that all the shots would be given out by June or whatever. And so the next day after that, they said, we're going to have another vote about that next Monday. So I think we're going to go back to the semester system.
Yeah.
In the fall. And I do think Commons will be open. The vaccines will take care of everything.
Do you think, is there anything else that's come out of COVID that you think could stick?
I saw that.
Will some people have the opportunity to do distance learning that just may want to?
I don't think that's going to become a permanent option for people, even though I think next fall and next year, for a few students who just don't want to be here, we will make that available. But year after next, I think we'll encourage everyone to be back here. The 2 things for the future I maybe can tangibly touch or state are in the work life. There might be a plan to have people working at Bates work at home a little bit more to their choice if that's to their liking. And yes, there's some expenses that might be saved there.
Sure.
I'm in the office right now, and I'm pretty sure they turn the heat off at 4:00 because I'm the only one here. I ran home, got my sweater. So I think the choice, and a lot of businesses are doing this, looking at, is working home going to be a part of the permanent landscape. The other thing is that with Zoom, there will be a few more presentations and musical performances, engagements with notable personalities and celebrities or whatever by that mechanism. And so there'll be some in-person things, and then for those slightly controversial, for Martin Luther King Day, we got Angela Davis. So if we were trying to get Angela Davis in person that day, we would not have gotten her. So we actually found out that she did about 5 Martin Luther King presentations. So that's encouragement to all of you. Get a good speech about something and you can do it 5 times on Zoom. So I really think that's going to be a part of the cultural and political discussion landscape in the future.
Awesome.
Let me ask you if anyone else had any questions about the COVID life here on campus. All right.
And just looks like most people are on mute. So if you do want to just speak up, just unmute yourself. So.
Can I just ask really quick, what is the sports scene for the spring? What's happening with the sports teams?
Right. Well, good question. And NESCAC decided that the schools could do spring sports to their liking and accommodation. So this was about 3 weeks ago, and you expect me to know exactly what's going to happen in the various sports. So I see all the teams out today because it's so warm. But what I'm expecting is, of course, in playing Kobe and Bowdoin in sports, there's going to be kind of a state schedule. And so baseball, the lacrosse teams, and maybe even track and field are going to engage in the state. They're not going to try to do the whole NESCAC regular, everyone meet everyone, and then have a playoff at the end of the season. So that's 2 months ago, we were pretty convinced there would be nothing as far as sports for the spring. There was no there were no winter sports, and then the women's basketball team and the Colby team, they was legitimate. They snuck and did 2 games this past weekend. And we were trying to, the men basketball team were trying to get a game up at Colby. And that still might happen. And we really wanted to go up there because Colby just opened up a $200 million athletic facility, with a basketball, it's okay. I'll be honest, it's a box that's all glass, so we wanted to go up there and beat them. So, but they didn't say yes. And then Bowdoin said that they would be willing to play us in men's basketball, but we would play on April the 12th. We didn't figure out why. So it's like, I guess they hadn't been practicing. So there'll be some sports, and that's really important for the seniors because that's incredible. In Division I, people can come back for another year, but you couldn't do that in Division III or in NASCAC. And so I'm glad for the seniors to have a little bit of activity.
You mentioned basketball. We did have a question. Do you still play pickup basketball in the gym? And if so, is the quality of play as good as it was when you first came to Bates?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, that's a great question for me. So I'll try to keep that one short too. So honestly, I don't play as much as I did. I haven't even played intramurals for about 8 to 10 years. And that's 8 to 10 because I played 10 years ago and then I didn't. And then 2 years later, some guy, he said, I'm going to want you to just show up for our team tonight. We need the help. So I showed up. And I was pretty tired at the end of it. So, but I go to the dining hall when it was open and I would talk a lot of, I guess in modern terms, it's a lot of trash, but, a lot of statements of, don't dare me, I might come over there and the whole bit. And then more important, in the dining hall, when I'm shouting in the dining hall, which was a lot of you are surprised to hear that Dean Reese is shouting in the dining hall. Well, it's always one topic. Current students insist that LeBron and his teams could beat the old Celtics and the old Lakers and the old Sixers. And that just drives me crazy. So I start shouting and they start shouting and oh my God, this was a regular occurrence in the dining hall and I can't wait for it to open up again so I can go back in there and take them on. So, so I do a lot of talking about basketball. On the topic of are the players as good? Actually, no. Your generation was better. And it lasted that way for about 20 years. And then I could start to tell that in today's world, many of you have children, children, they'll play one sport and not the other. So they might be really good in something, but they're not good at all in something else. And basketball has seen a drop off. So that enabled me to play intramurals into an extended later age. You can help me with this. I'm trying to, I'm not rushing towards retirement. That wasn't one of the questions. Maybe it was one of the secret questions, Craig. And, but I do have a hidden desire to be defined as, and I'll use this very important, informally, as the leading scorer in alumni gym history, So I'll let, Kathy and Sue Dolliner, chat about whether or not that would be appropriate or not. But yeah, I've been here so long. I threw in so many. And when I am in the gym these days, I'm in there with my son. He's actually 15 now, those of you can believe it. So I've used the Bates gym to teach him how to shoot well. And he's actually caught on pretty good. And so every time I do a practice shot with him, that counts for my total. All right. So I love the 1,000-point board over there. It's expanding each year, but I might be the leading scorer in Bates alumni gym history.
And I think we would all be very happy to informally support that.
All right. That's why I love 81.
Exactly. Let me open up. Who else has questions for James?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Craig. James, nice to know another parent in the group has a 15-year-old.
All right.
Son.
Yeah.
I did have a question back to COVID. I was wondering, how did the COVID experience impact admissions to Bates? Yeah.
Great question. So in one sweeping sense, it affected all the admissions offices the same way because virtually no campuses were doing the tours and the whole bit. So everyone wondered on the front end, what are we going to lose? What momentum are we going to lose in terms of showing and sharing our way to everyone, and with the tours, which are so important, and have so many people come here and fall in love with the place? Will it be damaging not to have it? So fortunately, it hasn't. And I think because in so many aspects of COVID, we all have had to adjust and just go with it. And so some things are not, have not been as affected as we might have assumed on the front. I don't even have any good examples now, even though I have lots of examples of, what we've all experienced in terms of, I guess today's Tuesday. I have no idea what day of the week it is. Okay. And those kinds of things. But admissions has found that the level of inquiries have sustained themselves. We haven't had a drop off in the number of applications. We did our class admit last Saturday, and they feel very good about getting the approximately 500 students that that we want for the college. Last spring and last fall opened up right on target. It's been remarkable, almost in a way that if you were to mathematically research and define, what might happen and do all the algorithms and the whole bit, if someone painted a picture of that nothing will change and everything will be just fine, nobody would believe that, but that's what has happened. And so I've heard first year students talk about they would try to absorb the website even more fully. Working with the international students, most of whom come here sight unseen, they say, I can extract certain things out of the website, and that's why I wanted to come here. And so that's the answer to the admissions story. And admissions doesn't want to have another year like this, but so far so good. And of course, on May 1st, we'll have our real answer, but they haven't been worried, and they're saying the signs look good. So internet, word of mouth, conversations, maybe there was more conversations between grads and prospective students, this year. The Zoom life has became a regular life for the candidates. I guess young people, they don't mind being on the screen and, and have adjusted as we have. So that's the answer. We've been very fortunate, and we're pretty excited about the class coming in.
That was a great question, John. Anybody else? Okay, don't be so quiet.
All right, I got one for you, James. So I'm just curious your take, just how typical, I want to say, how things are graded nowadays. I had a couple of years ago, I was up there, and it was just before finals the second semester, and I was catching up with Coach Fresh, and I was asking him because all the kids are out there doing their workouts, spending quite a bit of time, and I asked him, I said, don't they have to study? And he said it's different than when we were there. They don't have no blue books, the 3-hour finals. It seems like it's more projects.
Yeah, okay. That's true. I was, excuse me. So for the module that we're in now, the exams are next week on Thursday and Friday only, just 2 days. And I said to a student yesterday, I said, back in the day, every student had 4 exams, sit-down exams. And if you didn't, you had at least 3. And the student immediately said, well, I don't have any sit-downs next week. I just have one long project and one long take-home paper. So take-home exams are the way of the world, the Bates world now, I think, including everywhere. If it's true that there are sit-down exams, they tend to be the professors who were here in the 80s and 90s, and the professors will identify that they want to give the opportunity for the student to show what they know through written take-home exams. And so our language of the day was take-home exams, with an open book, or almost like an open book exam. And so that absolutely is the regular way. And so students are so accustomed to it. It's not that they find it strange to have sit down exams, but I actually preferred sit down exams. I just like to get it done and show what I knew. But if you ask the question to students now, what do you prefer, take home exams or sit down exams? Most of them, about 75% or more, will say take home exams. And, that's what they kind of like. I think that's what they're most accustomed to. And so to go and sit in the gym, I used to get upset when, they would, in your day, they took alumni gym and put seats in there, right? And there's those old photos of the whole bit. So I, show the photos these days of that. And the students are like, oh my God, what are they doing? Are they torturing you or something? So it was a form of it. But so you're right. I would say that in terms of your conversation with the coach, I don't look at it as knowledge, and it's just how you give the knowledge, in terms of absorbing the knowledge and hard work, emphasis on writing, analysis, which Bates has always been into. That's still the same and very strong. I'd like to point out, we won't get into a conversation about the rankings magazine, which is just a terrible thing. President Reynolds, when right after you left, the ranking started for U.S. News and World Report. So the first year, he didn't send the information into the magazine like all the other schools, because he said he thought it was a ridiculous effort. and so about 25% of the students were upset with him for not having sent it in. So he sent it in, and we came out 18 that year. All right. Well, a lot of that has to do, as with, the 17 schools above us are all billion-dollar schools and still are. And, we're on the way to that. But I always respected it. So in the middle 90s, there was an educational outfit that got together, and they said, we're just going to measure schools by teaching. And so they put every school into the mix, Ivies, Stanford, the whole bit, all the NASCAS, every school in the nation. And with that combination of schools, we came out 15th as best teaching school in the US. All right. Now, I would tell you that as strong as our teaching was then in 1995, I think it's better now. All right. And so the US News and World Report did a segment about 3 years ago on, strongest teaching schools, and we came out 10th there. Now, this is the first you've heard of it. And so, here it is, colleges and universities, and it's about teaching, engagement. You read a lot of books, wrote a lot of papers, and the students still do now. They're always comparing, they always start with Harvard. Do we do more work here than at Harvard? Well, everybody knows it's yes. There's only 4 NASCAS that require a thesis these days. And we do. We're not thinking about changing that. And if anything, it was great. We put in not a increased, arduous, burdensome emphasis on writing, but an emphasis on writing from year 1, in the middle years, and year 3. So 3 different stages that you must complete for graduation. And that works. People can write well coming out of here. I have a lot of stories. I was at a reception in Boston, and 2 stories about writing. I was at a reception in Boston, and the organizers of the reception for the Watson Fellowship, okay, we had a recipient that year. They came over to me because I had driven the student down to the reception and said, "You're from Bates?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And this guy says, "I want to let you know, I'm from the firm of X, Y, and Z in Boston, and my writer comes from Bates." And he had his hand in the air. And I'm like, okay, good to know. And the other story was person was working for a firm as a grant writer, and went to the Rockefeller Foundation for a reception because that little company got $4 million grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. And I said, well, I know that the president of the companies, go get the money and all that. Why did you go? The Rockefeller Foundation is a Bates grad. Rockefeller Foundation said, when you come down to get the money for the grant, can you bring the person who wrote the proposal? So You should all go into your companies now and say, I want to write up the next proposal. I'll make it good. So,
Dave Donlin, I see.
Great,
have a
thank you.
question.
Yeah, actually, you answered my question. I was going to ask about whether you required the thesis now, because that was probably the most painful, but in retrospect, most beneficial experience I had at academically at Bates. So it's good that you're maintaining that tradition. Is it? I mean, I know some things don't require it, right? But has it increased or decreased the number of disciplines that require a thesis?
oh, well, every discipline requires a thesis or a senior project. And
Okay.
so a senior project simply is in math or some of the sciences, and it was really a project with a write-up over against a thesis, but it's the same expectation of effort and a requirement for the writing three component of the general education requirements. So that's all the same. You know, it's true
good.
that the English department is larger than it was in your day, just by virtue of numbers. Biology is larger, so they'll have English thesis seminar where you take the class each week and you kind of get the structures in place, but you are writing your thesis, and it's of the equal high demand as writing individual thesis in any other department. And in the English seminar and in the individual departments, you meet once a week with your thesis advisor, as you recall. And so everyone graduates Bates, you know, the sweeping statement, everyone graduates saying, yeah, we should keep that. And actually, as the years go by, people will always return and say that experience, especially the one-on-one conversations, and then shifting from all the reading to all the writing and getting it done was one of the most important components of their education. So over time, including now, the thesis is articulated that way. And I like that. One thing that's not true for you or the students these days, I like to talk to these graduates from the 60s and 50s as they have come through for their 50th reunions in recent years. And they all had to take public speaking. And they all say the same thing. I took public speaking. I hated it. It was the best course I took at Bates College. And so I've actually gone on to, you know, it sounds a little burdensome. I've actually talked to the faculty about not requiring public speaking, but a lot of the departments and classes will have these oral presentation panels that, you know, at the end, and if they were to formalize that a little bit more and emphasize, you know, public speaking and a whole bit within it, I think that would be in the whole, in the spirit of Bates, and because those graduates talk about how incredible that experience was for them, then why not have everything? We have that speaking component, we have the thesis component, we have everything else. And the faculty is not at all thinking of getting rid of the thesis requirement for any single department at Bates.
Yeah, that's good. In fact, the geology department, which is what I majored in, we actually had to defend our thesis in front of a panel, and as painful as it was, it's definitely is. I couldn't agree with you more about having that public speaking as a component.
Yeah, seems like yesterday you did that, right, David?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the memory is still there.
You would love to do it again, right?
Yeah, sure. It's funny, you know, you do a lot of speaking and it comes naturally now. Back then it was so hard.
I understand.
I don't do geology anymore, but it was fun at the time.
I totally understand. So,
Doug Olney, I think you have a question.
Yeah, well, not a question, but just a follow-up comment. I mean, one of the best courses I took when I was there was the public speaking course that Bob Branham did at the time, and that was great. I enjoyed that a lot, and we covered it. And you know, so I can see why that would be very helpful in the future, or you know, as the part of the experience. But the other thing also, you know, both my parents went to Bates in the 50s, and the other course that they ought to take them was the cultural heritage.
oh yeah.
So I can't imagine that anybody would advocate bringing that one back, since that's kind of a little bit outdated. But I think that's the, you know, that's the other course that I think anybody from that generation, that's what they speak of, is they recall that course as well. But yeah, definitely, I enjoyed the public speaking one with Brandon. He was great.
Mhm. True. A lot of people said that about the Branham course, and we do have a course. It's just obviously not required for everyone, and it's hard to get into. And cultural heritage for everyone was in the 50s and 60s, and it was 4 semesters required of heritage, history, philosophy, literature from around the world. And it was pretty strongly organized, as from what I have been informed, but it's hard to cover everything, and it was required. And so that made people kind of push back at it. I think, if we had a short term called cultural heritage, or play around with the words a bit, and mimic that a bit, I think it could be kind of valuable, not to require it, but, just to have it part of the base lore. Because as your parents state, Doug, it was, it was a headache to go to, kind
Yeah.
of like chapel,
Yep.
but, they did extract some good things out of it.
Yep.
Who else? Dolly, I know you have some questions for James.
Yeah, so James, is there anybody on the screen here that still owes you money? You were so kind to everybody. You took care of everybody back in 1981 and in the 70s, and you loaned everybody your car. You're probably still driving that same car, right? What, it would go for like 300,000 miles. So,
Yeah.
we're on the gift committee for our class, so we can help if somebody owes you some money. We can make sure you get paid back.
Oh, that's so generous. Yeah.
He's looking around, guys. He's looking around.
I am, yeah. Actually, no one here I owe money, I mean, not money.
Yeah. Well, the fact that we're
But
still
no one
upright,
here.
there's
No one
a lot
here,
of
yeah,
us that
So,
owe you thanks, just because we made it through Bates, and we learned a lot, not just from Bates and the faculty, but we learned a lot from you. And that you were a good role model. So my question for you, as it gets to the top of the hour here, is who are your final 4 picks, and are any of them left?
I saw that, so I prepared an answer. So yes, of course, my final 4 are Oral Roberts, Loyola. No, I'm just joking. And so, even though I have 2 children, one 15, one 13, boy and girl. And I said to them, you don't have to play basketball to live in my house. You just have to like it. And so, so our family has done this great thing, which we missed this year. For most of the NESCAC games, and it's more the men's team than the women's, but sometimes for the women's teams, we will go to all the NESCAC games, even on the road. We haven't been to Hamilton yet, and my children are upset that we haven't gone to Hamilton. So I said, it's 7 hours. So my son's training to drive now, so maybe we'll go to Hamilton next year since he could share the driving. And so there's a basketball knowledge that they have has been cultivated with them. And the point is this. So I pick each year what's going on. My daughter, she picked Abilene Christian this year. She picked Oral Roberts, so she's way up there. She picked Loyola.
Wow.
And even better, 2 years ago, she was one of 16 people in the United States that picked UMBC to beat Virginia. And so she's got a long-lasting legacy forever, and she's good. She knows what she's talking about. She doesn't play. She doesn't like the idea that I would drive home from the basketball game if she were a player and tell her all the things that, nowadays, with this AAU stuff, you're in Boston and you're driving home, my son has to hear it from me nicely. And so she decided to become a swimmer, and because I know nothing about swimming. so she's happy, everybody's happy, and we travel around. So just to answer your question, I picked Iowa and Oklahoma State to go to the Final Four, so they're out. And I still have Baylor and Gonzaga in. And that's the answer. We're enjoying watching the games. It's a whole new landscape, you know. Sherry.
Yeah, sorry. I give a lot of credit to Doug only for figuring out how to raise his hand. I thought I was good at this, but I'm failing completely. James, I just wanted to make a comment before the evening concludes.
Sure.
Early on, and when you started to talk, I almost wanted to cry because you started, I could do it now, but that's for other reasons. You started to talk about sort of the kind of students that you brought to Bates 40 years ago, and that your perception was that that vibe, that camaraderie, that spirit of the way we treated each other then is still there today. And I just want to say to you, the only reason why that happens is because the admissions department knows how to make it happen. And I hope that no matter what happens going forward, you can keep that alive. Because until you mentioned that tonight, I hadn't really thought about it, but you're absolutely right. I remember applying in 77, and I applied to, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 schools, and they all had great academics. I knew what I wanted to do, but when I went to the college and I met other students and I met faculty and the staff, there was something different. And I knew right away that was Bates was the place for me. It changed my life for a million reasons, including Jim Carrigan. And I just want to say thank you, to you and all the others that made that happen. And if you can keep that, that aspect of the campus and the college life alive, bless you, because I didn't find that on any other campus I interviewed at. And it really was special. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're probably all here at this meeting with you now, and we're still all friends, is that it was a very unusual group of people you brought together. And if you can keep doing that all these years later, thank you. So I just wanted to thank you, and also thank you for being here tonight.
You're very welcome. And I'm going to comment on that a little bit, and it'll sound like I'm rambling, but it is the same point. It is something that admissions knows how to do. I don't know if there's a formula or a secret file or something, but a lot of people comment on it. It might make sense that people grow up and they're quite incredible students like all of you were in your high schools. I have a joke around here, and sometimes I'll go to a group of students and say, all right, now we're going to talk about how you dominated your high school. All right. So all the Bates people are very modest and like, oh, no, I didn't dominate my high school, but oh, yes, you did. You had the extra key and all this. And, so, we don't have to be arrogant about it, but, you're really strong people. And then you were looking to go to a place, it might not have been as strict as no fraternities and no sororities, but, you're looking to go to a place where you can engage. I mean, it's the world we really want to have. Could this place actually be that? Well, it started out being that Bates a long time ago. And as you were coming in 81 and people coming now, how the founder founded the school might not, be something you can touch or care about or talk about much, but there's something here that I even pick up from the 40s grads when they were around and the 50s grads and then today's student who people say, yeah, I kind of wanted to go to Bates. So a few anecdotal stories, just a few. One of the international students said that, he could read between the lines and this was the place he wanted to come. And he had applied to other schools and he had also applied to Yale. And so every 2 years, I could send it to you now, a student gets into Bates from another country and they say, I got into Bates and I got into Yale. I really want to go to Bates, but everyone here, wherever here is, says I have to go to Yale, And can you tell me more about Bates so I can tell my family or my community about, So I have a template letter that I just push the button on and send it with all kinds of wonderful things about Bates, and they always go to Yale. Now, 3 years ago, we finally beat Yale. I was so happy. We had beaten all the other Ivies, all right? And we finally beat Yale, somebody choosing to come here rather than go to Yale, and that was super. The anecdotal story is one guy said, he said, I was so glad I didn't go. I was so glad I did not get into Yale because I really wanted to go to Bates. So he came to Bates because he wanted to be a part of this community. He did everything here. He was from one of the African nations, you know. I get the stereotype. He came here, he became an ice skater, right? He left out of here. He's taught at a private school here, Choate, actually, after graduating, and they loved him. And then now he's back in South Africa teaching at an incredible school there called the African Leadership Academy. And he sends 2 students per year to Bates, among other Bates graduates even working at that school. So there's that. I'll tell the story about 15 years ago. I went to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. I'll give you the short version. It's in its history of Civil War, John Brown, all that, you know, some of you know. It's incredible. And so, but I went to the campus of a college, which had been a historically Black college, and it closed in 1955. So they would have reunions every year, and they still do. I've shown up there, you know, 4 or 5 times and get along with the people. The first time I went, they were in a circle, and it wasn't because I was there. And they were the older grads. They closed down in 1955 because in West Virginia had the interesting kind of situation that as integration slowly started in the southern states, West Virginia kind of went first. So this school closed down because pupils went off to the state schools, which integrated earlier than other southern states. All right. So they were talking about the life on the campus. And they said, there was about 20 of them, and they were saying, yeah, our school was just like, it's so enjoyable to go to our school. You know, we had, you know, had the men and women, you know, being educated together. We didn't have any fraternities or sororities, you know, and all of our organizations were open. So everybody could go to all the organizations, you know. And what we really loved was like when, you know, it would be evening lectures and be a guest speaker and all, the faculty would come and they would be there. And then afterwards, everyone would kind of talk and engage with each other. And you could ask questions to your faculty about, you know, whatever, you know, the lecture or life or just their family. And they were equally interested in you. I was sitting in a chair and my hands were just like clamped onto the edge of the chair because the more they talked, I was just sitting there saying, if every Bates grad was sitting here, it would be like, oh my God, they're just like Bates. And they just loved the interaction. That was the nature and the context of the place. Long story short, in 1867, that college was founded by Orrin B. Cheney. And so I tell people, you know, guest speaker came 2 years ago. He was packed house, 400 people in the chapel, and he spoke, and it was wonderful. And everybody, you know, he was signing books afterwards. And I went up and I said, "How you doing?" It was a great speech, you know. And he happened to be from Mississippi. I was born in Alabama, and I said, "Yeah, I was born in Alabama." He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "How long? What do you do here?" I told him. Then he looked up at me and said, "There's something different about this place." And he said, you know, he said, I could feel it. You know, in fact, he got up that night, he had a speech, and he didn't tell the audience there's something different about this place, but he told me later, he said, I changed my speech and I just spoke extemporaneously because I just wanted to tell you what I really wanted to say. And it was a whole, you know, sharing context about our society and the whole bit and what we need to do. All of it. And so we can all tell stories like that. And the students come here now and they pick to come here, you know, because of that. I think we should even make more of it. And so Sherry and everyone, I know that a part, you know, it might not have been an active part of your decision to come, but it was a part of your decision to come. This thing about, oh, up at Bates, you know, the guys. And lastly, anecdotally, when I was in college, and even before that, friend called up and asked me if I wanted to apply. All right. I was a senior and I played basketball, you know, so that other graduate working at Bates invited a group of students from Middlebury to come up for the weekend to one of these big weekends where it's the big party, like, you know, Triad and Halloween and Winter Carnival. And now we have the gala. We have a new event called Lost Valley Night, which is a nice addition to the calendar. Everyone goes to Lost Valley. There's not only free skiing, but music and free food and the whole bit. I'll tell you about it next year. You can come up, okay? And so this group of friends came back to me at Middlebury and they said to me, wow, you would really like that school. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, it has a different history and there's a community there that, you know, it's not over here. And, you know, there's a whole lot of interaction, you know, cultures kind of blend more. And they said, you would really like it. And so I was really struck by that. And so I got the opportunity to come here and avail myself of it. I wasn't even thinking of that actively when I applied. You know, I applied, I got the job, I was wonderful, Dean Kerrigan was great, all that. And so the last anecdotal story will probably come out in this form. I got here and I had the job. I'm here on the second day of the job. And one of my colleagues says to me, one of my colleagues, happened to be Brian Fitzgerald. So you guys remember him. He was in charge of student activities. He says, do you know that Benjamin Mays attended Bates College? And, you know, we didn't have internet and all that. I read as much as I could about Bates, but I didn't know that. So I looked at Brian Fitzgerald just like this when he said that. I just turned my head. I was like, Benjamin Mays, the president of Morehouse, went to Bates? Now, I'm from the South. I know Benjamin Mays. You know, I just never thought that, you know, he was educated outside the South, you know? And then I thought about it and I said, you know, Brian Fitzgerald just couldn't make that up on his feet all of a sudden. It must be true. So then I investigated, did Benjamin Mays go to Bates? And yes, he did. And a whole lot of other people. And based upon a principle that Cheney put into place of having everyone go to school together, poor Maine farmers' children, women and men, African Americans. You might know that the presence of African Americans was controversial on a college campus back then. And the presence of women at Bates was even more controversial. Cheney's vision was actually so far ahead that I don't think we all comprehend what he was about. And I'm not sure people did then or now. And he had this great line about what he was trying to do. He said he wanted Bates to be the college for coming times. So all of that permeates through our existence here. And when I've met, you know, graduates from a long time ago, and I always made a point to talk to the older grads, you know, it was there. And now, today it comes to me in the form of parents. Parents arrive here and a lot of times they're parents of color and they'll look at me on the first day and I look at them and they look back at me and they'll say, I read about this school. And I say, yep. And they're like, is it true? I say, oh yeah, it's true, you know? And so they just love the idea that a place would be defined and have a context, tangible and ongoing, that's going to validate everyone. And that's what we all need to try to do every day we work here. And I actually think that's more important for Bates to do than to sit around, and this is a complaint, you know, trying to say, how do we compare with the other schools? And I don't know if we're comparing because they're great schools, and they are, or we're comparing because they're on the US News and World Report magazine that didn't exist when you were here. I liked it when you were here because in your day, every school thought they were number one and every other school thought they were number two. And so it was better that way. So there we go. I could go on and on about it, but I'm glad to share that thing about a little bit of Cheney and the spirit of the place and admissions. That's right. Even if they're doing it by accident, it is working. And every year students leave out of here saying, I don't know what it is, but the best people just come here. And I was just so glad to have known these people during my 4 years. And it goes on and on and on. Everyone here, all the graduates classes talk about how they have their friend enclaves that get together and the whole bit. We have a lot of graduates who are sending people up here now. I'll stop there because I'll keep talking until midnight.
and that's all right. I mean, technically our call goes to 7:30. So, and I know some people have to leave, and that's great. I'm glad you've been here. But other questions? Anyone have another question?
Dean Reese, is there anybody there that's been there as long as you have? Do you know anybody there that's been there as long as you have?
Yes.
By the way, I was part of your first, what they used to call it, the mentoring, what do they call it? Guidance counselor. I was older than you and you were my guidance counselor.
So
I didn't know whether you were
hey,
guiding me or not.
we're gonna keep it all confidential, Brian, and you know.
Got a lot of history there, Dean Reese. I hope you know that. I realize on
Yes,
this
I do.
call that I was keeping quiet here for a while, but there's some stories out there that I really don't think that you really want to get out in the public domain.
Well, I've learned to, if such a story, surfaces, we can talk around it. Nowadays in our society and in the world, you have your lawyer shape the language. So, we've learned all that stuff. So you make it sound good and a bit. So there are a couple people who have been here longer than me. One that's well known this year is retiring, and that's Martin Andrucki from the theater department. And so the college is doing a great thing of really pushing his classes. I think because they are also online, in addition to being in person, you can just kind of tune in. And I'm going to make it happen that on the last class, everybody tunes in. I think to be present for the retirement lecture of a professor is would be a great honor for him and well deserved, and a whole bit. A couple other people working here have been here equally. I never tried to set any records. When I talk formally about my time here, I break it up into 4 parts, and it just kind of kept flowing very naturally and wonderfully. And so I've been very happy about it. It doesn't seem like the length of time it is, but it's about 3 or 4 people here, Brian, and well, whoever stays here the longest, all good. I think there's a record of 52 years by someone who stopped working a couple years ago. And so I'm at 43. So I don't know. I'm not trying to break that record. I've been very fortunate in my life. My father and mother are still around. My father's 97 and my mother is 94. And they live in Connecticut now, becoming UConn fans, Kathy. And so my father, he actually formally retired at 72, but then he took 7 additional jobs after that. So he really retired at 93. So I told my wife that, I'm not going to ever retire. And she said, I know. And my father, who's 97, he said to me 1 month ago, he said, after this COVID thing is over, there's a couple churches I think I can go and preach at, on a regular basis. So I'm going to get back out there.
Good,
So, yeah.
Anyone else?
I have one. So 43 years, that's amazing. And I'm sitting here thinking that a lot of hellos and goodbyes happen over and over and over again. And, there's a lot of joy and a lot of sadness with that. And you've seen generations of other, children from some of the folks that you had at the beginning. How do you deal with so many hellos and goodbyes in the passage of time?
Yes, thanks, Kathy, and thanks for your questions on the preliminary and all. It's great to see you, and for all of you, Kathy and everyone here. It just seems like yesterday we were talking here on the campus. Okay, so yeah, it really does. I get that question, and so I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 10 years into it, I dealt with what you're raising. How do you say the goodbyes and it's okay, and you have really gotten to know people well? And so the answer is, I just kind of, there's no expression for it. It's not taking it as it comes, but it just, at the end of the year, when I say to people, students all the time, well, we're going to ease out, some of them say we're not going to say goodbye. We're just going to like pick up, and I say, that's what we're going to do. We're going to pick up our conversation where we left off the next time I see you. Fortunately, I have this pretty good memory, and I won't, a really good memory. And yes, Brian, we won't bring up a lot of situations, sometimes at reunions, people come up to me and they say things like, hey, Dean Reese, you want to know what happened on the pool table in Adams? I said, nope, I don't want to know. I do not want to know. We want to tell you, So, but back on the question, we're going to pick up where we left off. So person graduated in 99. She came back about 5 years ago. And I told her that. And so interestingly, I can almost literally remember what we last talked about, when we stopped, or just the nature of what we talked about. So she visited with professors in the whole bit and had a great 3 days, gave a presentation on campus. And then she left the campus and she was in Portland, and she calls me and says, Dean Reese, I can't believe this, but I'm here at the airport and I'm crying. And I said, oh, yeah, what's the matter? She said, oh, nothing's the matter. She said, you said when I left in around 99, that when I came back, we would pick up the conversation where we left off. And that's exactly what happened. So in terms of the nature of what we would engage about, we did that. And so I'm glad that she had that experience, and and she told all her friends. And so I just maybe there's a I talk about the Bates spirit, and there's a Bates conversation, and there's a way of interacting that goes on, that we're always glad to see each other. We ask questions about how we're doing and what's the latest. I remember you used to do that or that, informally or informal. I love that piano behind you, Sherry, And so, obviously that's next time I see you, I'll ask you about the piano. All right. And so that's the answer, Kathy. And,
And I will just tell you, there's nothing like the piano in the chapel.
Oh,
Nothing. That's what brings me back to reunion every time.
Okay. I'm so glad you said that, because guest artists have said to me, this piano is just amazing in the chapel. I'm not joking. And so my wife plays piano and she knows the story. So I like to brag about our piano, and the piano in Olin gets equal. I said this to Professor Scott years ago before she retired. So our pianos get such praise from the visiting artists. And one artist from one band, we were trying to shut the light off and go home, and she went back in there. She just kept playing. She's, oh, this piano is so good. It was just, it was such a moment. I just let her stay there. So I'm glad you said that. So such things just permeate our environment and landscape here. And so I'm so glad you said that, Sherry. And so it blends with what we're talking about, Kathy. And there's a joke your brother told me. Here it comes. It's not the funniest joke, but I use this expression, so Kathy, you're from your hometown. It's
Greenville.
Sorry?
Greenville?
Greenville, exactly. And so, and COVID, can't remember. So Greenville. And so we were playing basketball and something odd happened and everybody argued. And then we decided to go on, weren't in agreement whether it was a foul or not. And then you'll get this. So he turns to me, Neil, and says, junction rules.
Oh, yes, yes.
Which means in the great metropolis of Greenville, right across from it is Greenville Junction. And so in the little rivalry between the two communities, if something is uncertain or unusual or just plain odd or weird, you label it as junction rules.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. So I learned to use that expression with in life, and with Neil and with the two daughters who've been through here and a whole bit, So it's an engagement, that and when so unfortunate everyone can't do the reunion this year. And yes, if you all come up next year and engage somewhere around, that would be good. Maybe you should do that. I've actually said to, where's Meredith? Don't listen to this, Meredith. We should do a reunion for every class every 3 years. People really want to see each other, And so now, like how people have figured out, if it's a reunion weekend and it's, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, now just take Thursday off and get up here early on Friday and do the whole thing. Sunday is not really doesn't really count, and people just can't stop talking to each other. There's no sleep that weekend, and then the engagement's just taken. So that's a long answer to your question, Kathy, but we just pick up where we left off. And
Well, I am very impressed with not only your memory, but also all your kind words that you share with everyone. So thank you.
I was keep looking down because I was looking at my notes to see if there's any story that I really wanted to tell, and I did not. I think I covered it all. I will say this one thing, because I'm always trying to think of innovations to make the life here even more interesting. And I shared out that it's okay, it's not the regular Bates way, but we're a little bit more structured these days in the administration. It's a little bit more vertical, everything on the table. A lot of things get decided at the senior table of the college. And whereas Reynolds was here, he had a way of proceeding where everyone's office made the decisions. You reported it up to him, and he would, review it. And if he didn't like something about it, he'd say so. And if he liked it, he'd say, hey, great, go ahead. So I'm not talking about that's a better model, more perfect model, but now it actually feels a little bit more bureaucratic and all that. And I'm not sure why I got into that, but anyway, I wanted to share out how, and what I believe in, and I think all of you, is that if there's going to be a conversation, so even when the faculty voted a couple of weeks last month to have the module system in the fall, the students got upset. And what they said was, we weren't consulted, all right? I was really impressed with Dean Carrigan, and every time we were talking about something that we are going to put out there to the campus, he would go, oh, I got to get some students involved, and get them on the committee, in his, energetic, frenetic way. And I just really respected that, and I realized it was a principle, invested in the place that invested in, rather than just a good thought. And so, for the next meeting, students have been contacted about their opinions about the module and the whole bit, it would go. So back in the day, in terms of basketball, we had the intramural league, and it was incredibly active when you were here. A, B, and C leagues, I wish we had figured out a way to put the C league games on closed circuit college television. I think everyone would love them. They were that interesting. And Bates was the only school in the nation where it was normal to say this: oh, I have an intramural game tonight. Oh yeah, what time is it? 11 o'clock. Oh, okay. 11 o'clock intramural games.
Right.
And so now this has changed. Back in the day, if you lived in a residence or a house, you had to play on your residence's team or your group of houses team, right? And we had this faculty team, right? It was a faculty team. I don't think any faculty members were on it, but anyway. And we came back every year. We were like the old Russians basketball team. Same people showed up, every year, and we knew each other, and we did well. And so what I noticed was that at the beginning of the year, because the members of the houses or the members of a dorm, and Adams or Smith or Page, had to get to know each other, they took a while for their team to gel and to play well. And then by the end of the season, teams that were no good at the beginning were just doing incredibly at the end, and the whole bit. And a lot of people form friendships out of it that they actually still talk about. I didn't know this guy at all. I didn't know this person at all. And we got to know each other through the intramural thing. So I have thought, and so nowadays you can just form a team and show up, so the soccer team back in '83 was the first one to, not '83, '86, the first team to kind of, challenge the system. And so now friends form the teams. I liked how it wasn't that the players were forced to get to know each other, but they were encouraged to get to know each other. And it's a model that we should look at in terms of all the things we do. We're all here at Bates. We actually wouldn't mind getting to know more people. It's one of the goals of coming here. And for things that make us do it, then we should. And so the big events, which are incredible, I already named those big dances that, you know, if you go 6 weeks without a big dance at base, people like start scratching themselves. They're like, oh my God, it's so weird. We haven't had a big dance, you know? And when I was in charge of the big dances, Bowden called me and said, you know, you have this big Halloween thing, you know, and we just can't get it going here. And so I gave them a lot of advice, and they put it into place. The next year they called them and said, oh, we had the greatest Halloween dance, you know, it was so good, just like you said, you know. So I said, oh, super. How many people went? They said 250. So I was like, I said to myself, 250, that would be a failure at Bates, right? And but that's a pro Bates comment. And so, so not forcing people to interact, but in the spirit of, you know, in a setting, make sure people try to get to know each other and make it happen, because to play the game, you had to stay in there and get to know each other. And a lot of friendships and bonds came out of that. I talk to people every year reunion about, you know, that. And so it's almost like something Bates would do. Maybe Bates did it by principle when it first was done. I don't know. But we could talk about that and kind of make it happen, especially back at the first question, what's different at Bates now than 40 years ago? In 2005 and 2010, in those years, I was like, what the heck is going on? And I figured it out. Probably the biggest change, one of the biggest changes is the smartphone.
Yeah.
I don't have to fill in the blanks on that for you, but yes, our wonderful students, as soon as they walk out of the classroom, they light it up to blue or whatever, and they look at it, and everyone can escape into that. So they realize that, and they still say they want to, you know, so our commitment to the one dining hall will always be true. And so when we get back to that next year, that'll be a nice reunion of people on campus to really have those conversations. And so the last thing I'll say on this long point is that I love it when I go out on the road and I'll, you know, some city or whatever, and I'll tell people, come to the event. We're going to be at this restaurant, you know, the whole bit. I said, we're going to have a great time talking, and we're going to talk so much, it's going to feel like closing down Commons. And on that line, everybody shows up. And because we all fondly remember closing down Commons, you know.
Absolutely.
Well, it closes a lot later now than when we were there, I discovered.
True. Even 9 o'clock.
Yes,
Can you
I was
imagine?
there talking to some kids, and before I knew it, it was 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Yep. Still opens at 4:30, and I figured out why it opens at 4:30, everyone. Commons opens at 4:30 still because it opened at 4:30 in 1855.
Love it.
That's great.
That's
Well,
pretty cool.
It's very cool. James, this has been wonderful. We really loved having you on. We really did. In summer, I mean, I love to hear how a lot of this has stayed the same. Even with changes, it stayed the same. And I think we all feel that. I think, you know, some of us have had like Bates students come shadow us at work, and you meet someone for a week and you're like, wow, that's just, I remember that, you know, it reminds me of so-and-so. And you can, regardless, a lot of us pick up our conversations right where they were, not the same conversations or that memory, but you pick up like you were with them yesterday. Or you pick up a conversation with somebody, and I know there's some on this call that I don't even know if we spoke during our 4 years, but we've gotten to know each other at reunions or other things since, and it's just like we always do each other type of thing. So love to hear that it's still there, and really, again, really thank you and appreciate you for everything you've done, also for you know, joining us tonight.
You're very welcome. I'll keep it brief. Thanks for everyone sticking around. Thanks for listening. We talk. It's easier to talk about yourself when you get the opportunity. And so I've enjoyed that. But I've enjoyed talking tonight and connecting with all of you whose memories I feel so, you know, and, you know, you came in your first years when I was in my first year, and we were all learning together. And we all can name sophomores that, you know, like we had great respect for. that the class of 80, they came in and told me everything, including things that weren't true, things like, well, I was doing housing. So someone said, well, the largest singles are in Page. So I gave a senior a Page room, and he comes in and says, why'd you give me a Page room? I said, well, that's the largest singles. He said, well, it's true, but nobody wants to live there. Some sophomore told me, Kathy, I can name the sophomores, Sue, I can name those sophomores. You know what I'm talking about. Lillian. All of you. So thanks, Craig, for conducting this and giving me this opportunity. And yes, that spirit, I talk about it all the time and I can't get enough of it. So it sustained me well over the many years, and, I engage in conversations similar to this every day. So can't beat that.
Love it. Love it. Well, I know we're all immensely proud of our educations and our time and our friendships, and it's great to see it still going. And whenever we do get back for a reunion, you need to still be there so we can all see you. So, and I don't see you going anywhere, right? So,
right.
We'll see. We'll ease on down the road and see you down there.
Sure.
It's another time.
This has been a treat. Thank you, James.
All right. Good to see everyone here.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, James.
Great to see
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.